What's up, Jets fans? Welcome to another edition of Jets Latest, where you get the latest on the Jets, Jets. I'm your host, the spitting statistician, Dane Martinez, and today I want to look at a couple of key spots on the 2025 regular season schedule for the green and white. Last month, when the schedule came out, we talked about it a little bit. We broke it up into chunks. We talked about some of the spots that I thought were really important, some of the hard stretches, some of the easier stretches. But then again, you never can tell, right? Because teams are different from year to year. There's always teams that you think might be an easy game that wind up being a team that kind of came from out of nowhere and winds up being a tougher game. There's always teams that go through a ton of injuries and maybe are easier spots than you would think. But we tried to talk about it in terms of things like where was the bye? We tried to talk about it in terms of back-to-back road games, things that kind of more objectively are good or bad. But today, where I want to focus on are a few what I would call pivotal spots in the Jets' schedule, where if they can get wins in these spots, I think it is very important for the overall outlook of the season for the green and white here in 2025. And usually the word pivotal means like you're going in one direction and then pivot in another. But for me, one of the most pivotal weeks of the 2025 season is week one, the season opener against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And why do I say that? I say that for a few reasons. One, this is a new roster. This is a new head coach, right? This is a new franchise quarterback. And we know this fan base here in the New York area. If they get off to a victory against the Pittsburgh Steelers, all of a sudden, all this kind of faith and confidence and optimism that we are talking about would start to grow. But you know the fan base. If Pittsburgh comes into MetLife in week one, ekes out a victory or curb stomps the Jets, all of a sudden, all of that hope is going to be gone by the wayside, and that idea of the quote-unquote same old Jets is going to be right back where we started, right? The other part is, as we talked about previously, the beginning of the Jets' schedule is actually, in my opinion, looking off the records of teams from last year, looking at the opponents that were in the playoffs last year, really kind of the toughest stretch of the season. As you look, the Steelers, the Bills, the Bucks, on the road against the Dolphins, that is a tough stretch, and quite frankly, 3 of the 6 games against playoff teams all season. It is, kind of respected as a tough stretch to start the season, and so if we can get at least one there, right, then you get a little bit of a cushion. So let's say they do lose to the Bills or in a tough trip to Tampa, right, later on in September, at least you can kind of be like, all right, we at least got that first one. I think the season opener is huge. And then again, the big elephant in the room, right? There could be a lot of revenge game narratives on the line. The NFL even came out and admitted that part of the reason they had Jets Steelers as week one in the season opener was because of some of those revenge narratives, right? Of course, for Justin Fields, but maybe for another quarterback as well. We will leave it at that, right? And by the way, the Jets are 3-point home underdogs in that game week one against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So if you're buying in like I am and like you should be if you're here on Jets Latest, you may want to get that number now, because if quarterback news changes, if the Jets start looking good, if people start more realizing what this team, what this energy, what this quarterback could be, that number is going to drop to below a field goal. Another spot that I think is interesting. Remember, we talked about a tough stretch to start the season, right? Pittsburgh, Buffalo, at Tampa, at Miami on Monday Night Football, Dallas. Then, in week 6, the Jets travel across the pond and see the Denver Broncos. And I think that week 6 game is pretty important as well for a number of reasons. One, that is what I think is the end of the real tough start. I mean, the Broncos were in the playoffs last year too, if you remember, with their rookie quarterback, Bo Nix, and a lot of people think that they have the arrow pointing up, right? So this is kind of the end of a quote-unquote tough stretch. It opens up a little bit with games against the Carolina Panthers, games against the Cleveland Browns as 2 of the next 3 games, right? So you want to kind of get this one. Also, quite frankly, it's a spotlight game. It's a standalone game. National spotlight with the game in Europe, right? And so this is going to be something new for a new head coach, for a young roster, having the kind of routine of going over across the pond, changing the flight patterns, changing the practice schedules, the time of the day that they're going to be playing here on the East Coast, at least at like 9 or 9:30 in the morning. Also, Remember, like I said, the Denver Broncos are a good team. So if the Jets kind of make a step forward, this game against the Denver Broncos could really have wild card playoff implications. You want to have that head-to-head tiebreaker against other teams you think could be in that same area competing for a wild card spot, right? And then the other reason I think this is important is, and they say this all the time, happy flight, right? In a big road trip, you want to get that win, so the way back is kind of a happy thing, and the Jets do not have the bye after the London game. The league usually offers teams the option. Do they want to have that bye or not? The Jets do not have the bye right after week 6. I believe their bye is in week 9, right? So you want to be able to, even more, have good momentum building when they come home and then see what hopefully is a little bit of an easier game against the Carolina Panthers the following week. And then, what's interesting to notice is that outside of the London game, the Jets have only 2, as of now, scheduled prime time games on the schedule: Thursday Night Football and Monday Night Football. Both of them are road games in the AFC East against the Dolphins and the Pats, respectively. Now, road division games are always important, right? If you're going to make hay, you want to win your home games and you want to pick a few off on the road. And so the fact that both of these road games at Miami and at New England are also on prime time, right? I think that puts the Jets a little bit of a disadvantage, okay? Instead of if it was 1 o'clock p.m. start on a Sunday. Because primetime games at home, it's tough to make that Thursday night football with the short week and the short trip. Always a tougher road to hoe, right? So that's why these are really important games. However, week 4 against Miami, what's interesting is week 3, they're at Tampa. So I'm going to be wondering to see, do they go from Tampa, fly all the way back up to the New York, New Jersey area just to turn around and fly back down to South Florida, or how they play it? Or do they kind of like stay on a college campus for the week, make it a kind of back-to-back road trip? As you can see, it's one of the only back-to-back road trips that they have on the schedule, weeks 3 and 4 against Tampa and Miami, both in Florida. The other thing that I do think is a benefit is, I say this all the time, when the Dolphins schedule comes out, you want to see what teams are going to Miami earlier in the season. In the sweltering heat in September, the Dolphins usually pick off and win a game that maybe they're not supposed to win. I think it's actually a benefit that we get this game at night instead of in the middle of the heat, in the middle of the day on a 1 o'clock start. So that's interesting. We'll see how they play there. And obviously on the road against Miami, always a pivotal spot for the Jets. Week 11 against the Patriots, Thursday Night Football, short week. Again, it is part of one of the 2 only back-to-back road games on the schedule. The thing is here, if they can continue what I think will be momentum after home games previous against the Panthers, against the Browns, this is after the schedule, in my opinion, opens up and maybe they get on a roll and can keep it going. Remember Thursday Night Football against the Pats last year? They actually had one of their best games of the entire season. So I think that is interesting. And also, you want to be coming off a win because look at that following game at Baltimore, which I actually believe is the single hardest game on the entire Jets schedule at Baltimore. Okay, I think that's the best team maybe in the entire NFL, and obviously Buffalo was going to be tough, but we play the Bills well. So I think going into what I expect to be the hardest game on the schedule all year, I think it behooves them and is really pivotal for them to maybe be continuing momentum coming off the Browns game and get a win there. Then the last division road game is not until the very last game of the season, week 18 against Buffalo. Now that one is TBD because they usually flex things in and out towards the end of the season. And if things are going well for the Jets, maybe this has implications for the wild card. Maybe the Bills have implications for the division, for seeding, home field advantage, right? So it's TBD, but also another interesting one where yet another road game in the division could be in a standalone spot, could be flexed to a Saturday standalone game, right? On like the New Year's Day or whatever it is. Could, if things are going really well for the Jets, be flexed into a Sunday Night Football spot if both of these teams have something on the line. And obviously, in the finale, there will be implications, whether it's for the Jets, whether it's for the Bills, or whether it is for both teams. And it's interesting, we play the Bills week 2, and then we don't see them again all the way until week 18. There's also a universe. A lot of people expect the Bills to be really good this year. The Bills are actually favored in all 17 of their games. There's a possibility that the Bills are so good and they have things locked up that they don't need to play everybody. And we are, scratching and clawing. Let's say going into, our 17th game after 16 games, we're 8-8. We're 9-7, and we're fighting for a wild card spot, and then maybe get the benefit of a Bills team that's resting Josh Allen for a playoff game or something like that. That will be a pivotal game, especially if things turn out looking good for the 2025 Jets. So those were, I think, are some key spots in the schedule. The opener to get off on a good foot with the revenge narrative with this new team, start to continue the goodwill instead of this fan base right away being like, forget about it. Same old Jets. I think the London game is a nice spotlight for us. And then keep an eye on those road games in the division where we're kind of in tough spots where our opponents, the Dolphins, the Pats, get them as primetime home games. And we'll see what happens to finish the season against who many people believe are the favorite this year in the AFC in the Buffalo Bills. But that'll do it for this episode of Jets Latest. Remember, as always, watch these videos, like these videos, subscribe to the Jets Latest channel, and tell a Jets fan friend to tell a Jets fan friend. If you want to see more from me, the spitting statistician Dane Martinez, remember, I am the host of the FTN Fantasy Show over on SiriusXM. We are getting into fantasy football season, to be sure. And so if you want to get more insights on how to build your roster, get your fantasy football draft going on to win your league and win that cash, you better tune in for that as well. But if you just want more of the green and white, we are here all the time. Subscribe to the channel, tell a friend to tell a friend. Always hit me up on social media at Spittin' Speeds. Hit me up in the comments as well. I love engaging back and forth with you green and white fans. I really appreciate all the positive comments, the growth in the likes, the growth in the subscriptions, the growth in the views as we continue to move forward to training camp and what should be a pretty good, exciting, and kind of new feeling season under Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji for the 2025 Jets. That'll do it for this episode, everybody. We'll see you next time. Peace.